Hi, Waldek.
Hey Björn.
How are you doing, my friend? I see people joining. We're already 12 people. So let's give it a little, some maybe half a minute or a minute for people to join. How are you doing? How are things in the Netherlands?
Quiet. Quiet. There are some folks outside, but not that many. The weather is a bit overcast. It's not that warm, but it's dry at least. So that's for a change. But yeah, now we are not allowed to go out. Or I mean, we can go out, but it's advised against. So yeah, we stay inside, even though the weather is really inviting to go out.
Yeah, it's the same here. It's like you know that I'm based in Spain, so we are already suffering since 2 weeks. We can go outside. The good thing was that my I think I dropped.
Yes, you were away for a second. Do you mind resharing your screen?
Yeah, no worries.
And I guess it's time to start. So let's get rolling.
All right, let's do
People
this.
are still coming in, but I guess that, yeah, let's get going with it.
All right, let me share my screen again. There we go. There we go. All right, then let's get started. All right, cool, perfect. Yeah, thanks so much for joining, everyone out there. I see we have 56 participants so far, so probably there will be some more folks joining, but let's start anyhow. So thanks for joining today. Our topic today is cloud governance, how to stay in control of Office 365 in 2020. And the hosts today are Waldek Mastikart, my dear colleague, head of product at Rancor, who I worked very closely with the past couple of months on this topic. And my name is Björn Erkens. I'm our head of business development at Rancor, trying to develop a new product towards cloud governance, which we will present to you guys in the end of this conversation. Before we start with the show, some general stuff. So for questions that we will answer at the end of this call, please use the Q&A functionality. There's a button in Zoom which says Q&A. Please use this instead of chat, and then our team can look through this and we try to answer that at the end of the talk. We will record this webinar and we will provide you with the recordings afterwards. With that said, Waldek, are you ready? Shall we get to it?
As ready as I will ever be. Thank you.
Perfect. All right.
Let's get going. All right. So as Björn said, today we'll talk about the governance of O365, and it's a pretty broad topic, right? Because it encompasses many different things depending where you come from. So with that, basically to set the stage and learn a little bit about your background and interest, we would love you to tell us what O365 governance means to you. So if you could, please enter in the chat, like just single sentence or a term. What does O365 means? What does the governance of O365 mean to you? And we'll wait a minute for the answers.
And what Waldek just said, now to confuse you even more, for this, please use the chat.
Yeah, because it's not a question to us. It's a thing. Yeah. So, who can control what? Okay. Privacy, AVG, and content lifecycle management. Interoperability without chaos. Very good. Money-making tool for MS, but useful. Fair enough. Any other opinions? Who can create O365 groups? Very, very good. Definitely in scope. Let's wait for another minute, see if anything else comes in. Cool. So external access, yes, like these are O365 governance, general frame and rules to make it work properly, who is allowed to create resources, collaboration. Yeah, so there's like, as you can see already, like it's many different things varying from security to external access to rules for naming things and so forth and so on. So Bjorn, how about you walk us through what we have learned through the research that we have done ourselves over the course of the last few months?
Perfect. All right. So we see 4 different points when we talk about Office 365 governance. First, what we see, what people out there want to get is obviously information about your environment. You want to see where you're at, and I heard who is creating groups, what is happening with regards to security and all of these different things. So you want to kind of get information what is happening in your environment. Then if you already have a governance plan, so for example, that could be an unused site for me is a site that wasn't touched for the last 60 days, and I want to then ask the site owner if I can delete or archive it. So that's apply governance plan to it. So make it kind of actionable. Create reports. So I want to give my different stakeholders or people involved a report. How are we doing with regards to governance? And then I want to act on it. Can I delete? Can I archive? What do I do with this information? Well, like Office 365 governance at scale.
Absolutely. So it's like the moment you create, like you often see a demo given by Microsoft or someone else, and they will show you perfectly managed tenant with 10 teams and everything is fine, right? But the moment you take it in production, after some time, your users will start to work with it. At some point, the adoption will go through the roof because people like will find their way around it, and they will understand like what can they do, what can they use, and then at that point you will see basically the growth. So you will need to have something that will allow you to manage it at scale. So when you think about the different things, like I would like you to answer a quick poll that we have. Um, when you think about the governance, right? And the poll is active now. You can vote, please. Like which topic, if you can pick only one, which topic regarding the governance is the most important to you or the most urgent now? We have results coming in for security, like majority security, 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 keep coming security. There are a few results around compliance, collaboration. There's one person around adoption, but the big majority is security. Compliance is slowly catching up, but really the majority is still security. Compliance is a close two. Any other votes coming in? Let's wait another 3 seconds, 2, 1. Okay, cool. So it clears to us that security, well, it was just another vote. So security is the most important topic, right? And it's unsurprising because it's about the data you have, the data you share with others, collaboration you do. Compliance is also an important part because that might be also related to things like GDPR, PII, and so forth and so on. So what are the topics, Bjorn, that we learn on our end doing research? Um, um, what were the most important topics that we have found on our end?
All right, let me get through it. So before we come to the most important topics, tell us, let's talk a little bit about why Office 365 governance at scale is hard, and where this pain actually comes from. So what we see when we talk to a lot of folks out there, like you, probably some of you are who are in this webinar together with us, is that obviously the self-service, this push from Microsoft towards self-service, people can build Power Automate, people can create groups and these kind of things that empowers the business user, but obviously it leads to sprawl. So you have a lot of orphaned resources out there, which makes it unpredictable on the cost side. You have a lack of security overview. It is kind of hard to find things, to find the relevant information if you have a lot of different things in Office 365 that the business built, you really need to do your hygiene there to kind of make sure that you find the relevant information easy and fast. And you always want to look at business critical resources owned by users. For example, you obviously want to make sure that, for example, giving an example, a flow is not built with the user account, but is shared. So if the user leaves the organization, that it still will work. So these are all things that we learned, what makes Office 365 governance at scale very, very hard to do this. And we come later to what we see, how people solve this issue for themselves currently, and how this can be done on an automated way. And before we come to that, let's take a look at how we can manage Office 365 out of the box. Walek, I think you have another poll for us, right?
Exactly, right? So if you think about Office 365, it's pretty broad. There is SharePoint, there is Exchange, there is Teams, there is this AAD part with Office 365 groups. There are many different things that are a part of it. And over time, we've seen only one thing is that it grows, right? And companies are kind of like starting with one area, slowly moving to another. So with that, I'd like you to tell us which area, with regard to the topic, the governance topic, which area do you find the most important now? Is it Teams? Is it Power Automate, Power Platform, SharePoint, AAD? Where do you spend your most time, and where do you see the most, I don't know, call it risk, call it interest, to know what's going on and how to keep things in check so that you are not exposed to any risks? And we see the first results coming in, like we see a lot of interest around Teams. Teams is definitely a big player, where originally companies would spend majority of time around collaboration in SharePoint files. Nowadays, we see a big move towards Teams, because it's all encompassing. It's discussions, it's conversations, it's video calls, it's files, right? And it's kind of this. It's like this umbrella for everything else. So without surprise, like Team is a big number one, followed then by SharePoint and AAD, right? So looking at all these different areas, what are the options, Bjorn, that for managing it out of the box? Like, what is the out of the box experience to manage it?
Well, so just one point, I mean, Teams is kind of self-explanatory in this current time of Corona. Everyone works from home, everyone has to work remotely. So we see a lot of organizations now enabling Teams, right? So with that said, I think we can all agree that enabling Teams is the most important thing that that companies do currently, but obviously now it all has to work now, and they're not caring about governance at the moment a lot, and maybe this will come back to us. So I think that's a big point here. When we look at how can people manage Office 365 out of the box, obviously you have these different admin centers which provide you with static reports. Problem with that is they're all over the place. You have different admin centers for different services, which provide you limited insights, and obviously these reports are not actionable. So you need to kind of group these together, and then you need to act on them somehow, which is currently very hard to do. Automation is possible, but it requires custom work like building something with PowerShell and these kind of things. And when it comes to that, obviously you need to have extensive knowledge of how to do this. Most organizations, they actually do this. They build stuff with PowerShell, but it's not actually their main focus, but they're doing it as a workaround, because there are other things they can do to actually automate. Typical manual governance setup, and then we can talk a little bit more about this stuff like PowerShell and how people help themselves. And maybe you can share your experience with that as well. Like, I think we have another part for that, right?
Exactly, right? So like the important part is like, okay, so what people out there do? We already discovered that topic is important. Like people want to know about governance. People want to know about what's going on, who has access to what resources, what's being created, and so forth and so on. We already established that Auth365 is pretty broad. Like there are a number of different services, each with its own admin center, reports, data points, and so forth and so on. So at that point, when you find this important and you want to get the report, the data, the insight in place, well, it's time to orchestrate that. You have to have something in place to ensure that the governance plan you came up with, if you have one, that you can actually enforce it, right? So with that, I'd like you to give us like one last vote to keep it really interactive. How do you go about it? Like what different things do you use? And in this poll, you can you can choose as many answers as are applicable to you. So what are the different things that you use in your company to keep the governance up? So as you ensure that you have all the data that you need, that you have the reports, the insight, that you can act on them. What are the different things that you do? And we see like many respondents have a governance plan, right? So that is obviously the basic, because that defines what is it that you want to do, what do you find interesting, what are the different rules by which you want to play. So basically the contract that you establish between the organizations and its laws and policies and employees, right? So that is the first answer, and we see the most replies on that. And then we see a close follow-up by standard reports and PowerShell scripts, and then a little bit of Power Platform and third-party tools. Let's see a second if any other votes will come. 3, 2, 1, no more. Yeah, there was one more vote. Anything else? 3, 2, 1. All right, so let's end it now. So as you can see, right, the governance plan is really like the basic foundation for everything else that we do. And we see some automation around PowerShell script. We see standard reports. So Bjorn, what have we learned from the research that we have done? What customers or what companies do with regards to the governance in their tenants?
Yeah, so the typical setup is that people build their own PowerShell scripts to gather the data, probably out of the admin centers, and the output is then put either in Excel or into a SharePoint list. And then people try to manually act on the data. So what do they do? For example, unused SharePoint sites. We have as a definition in our governance plan then that if a SharePoint site hasn't been touched for the last 60 days, this is marked as unused. We gather this data into Excel. Who is the site collection owner? Okay, let's then manually send him an email asking him if we really can archive or delete this site collection. What else we see is the same approach to prepare reports for meetings for the different stakeholders. And then obviously it's kind of hard, but people do this to track progress of these actions. Hey, can I delete or archive this site or this thing? They need to stay on top of that. Obviously, when we talk about this, how people are doing this is kind of a workaround because there's this pain, but it's not an optimal workaround, but very interesting to see. Let's have a look at the pros and cons of this kind of what we call do-it-yourself governance. Obviously, the pros are you can specify what you need. Every organization is very individual. You can say and specify what data you want to gather. You can efficiently check for specific governance violations because as we learned in the previous poll, you have a governance plan and then you can define, okay, what do I want to check for? You can build specific reports and you can handle these policy violations according to your business processes. But obviously there are a lot of cons as well. One con is, well, maybe it's not your primary goal to sit down and build something out with PowerShell. It needs an extensive experience, and obviously you need to stay on top of all of these things. There are so many changes with Microsoft, like on a weekly basis. So you really need to stay on top of these things to make sure that your approach works. What happens if the person responsible for building up this kind of governance system for you is leaving your organization? Yeah, the other thing is, obviously it's expensive to build and maintain. If it runs on Azure, it has recurring costs. It needs to be maintained. You need to stay on top of things. And another point that we see is that it distracts IT from doing its main job, namely facilitating business. So Waldeck and I have talked to about 30 or 40 organizations, and that's how these slides came about, right? So we learned about this problem, we learned about how people are solving that problem, Office 365 governance with PowerShell and these approaches that we just described. And we have something which I want to show to you now that we hope you can take to make your life a lot easier, which is called Rancor Governance. And it consists of 3 steps, which I will show you in a second. You can choose what you want to track very individually. You can build relevant reports as you wish, and then you can automate with your business processes in mind so that you don't have to manually send out emails and these kind of things. So with that said, let me just walk you through a demo of this version 1 that we currently have. All right. Well, like my screen can still be seen, right?
Yes, works like a charm.
Perfect. All right, so we have the first version of what we call Rancor Governance. And what you do is when you land in here, it's a SaaS application. You connect your tenant and then you land on our policy, let's say policy landing page. And in this, we will have a lot of pre-built policies for you, which you can furthermore tailor to your own needs. These policies come in different categories, like you have security, collaboration costs, and so on and so on. You decide which policies you want to track and you can then enable them. So I already enabled a lot of them. And for each policy, so for example, let's say there are no unused teams, for example, you see a short description of what that policy tracks for you. So this one here looks at teams that haven't been used in the last 180 days. And we will bubble up this information. And like I said, you will be able to configure these policies. So one organization will say, well, 180 days, no, we want to do 160 days. We want to do 90 days, and so on and so on. Another example, just to give you, just to show you another example, could be there are no unused sites. Okay, 60 days. Okay, you can manage that to your needs. You can customize that to your needs. Then in the next step, we would have details. So you first specify what kind of data you want to gather. So like what you would do with your PowerShell script as for now, but then you can do it here. And we will bubble up that information for you. So there are no unused sites. We show you all unused sites, who is the site owner. And what you will be able to do then is you can build reports on top of this information that we provide you, and you can share these reports with your different folks in your organization. So for example, you have your EMEA team and you want to show them reports around unused sites and Power Automates that are not shared with service account and unused teams and sites that have external sharing still enabled and these kind of things. So we can get this information and put it into reports. So that's only one side of the story, right? Now we have this, how can we gather data, very specific to your own needs, and how can I build reports on top of that I can share with the stakeholders. Now, what about automation? What about the part where you now are sending out email manually. We want to give you the opportunity for each policy that you enable to automate this by using Power Automate. So when you click here in the current version, get template, then we will bring you to a knowledge base article, which will describe how we do this for you, and you get a template that you can download into Power Automate. So I've already set this up, and in Power Automate, then, for example, we have downloaded this template here, disable flows that require premium license after approval. Let's see what this does. So what it does, it is this policy flows with premium license, and what it does, it goes through all non-compliant resources. So in this example, it finds all flows that require premium licenses. It checks if that flow is enabled. If no, it doesn't have to do anything. But if yes, then it sends out an approval to the flow owner, meaning he gets an email or he gets that thing in the Power Automate app if he has installed that. And this approval obviously is highly customizable, so you can just change this to your need. What we did is, can we disable flow XY? Hey, we have detected that flow. It requires a premium license. We currently do not offer it. Could you please check if it's okay for us to disable that flow so that it doesn't incur additional costs? And then the person can answer that question if that can be disabled or not. And then it will do the disablement in Power Automate. So let's have a look how that looks. So if we run a test, then what it does, it goes through the flow that I just described. So it goes through all, it checks for all the flows that require premium license, finds out which are not enabled, and then for each non-compliant resource, it pushes out this email that I just said, that I just described to you. And then I am now in Outlook as the owner of flows with premium license. And in a second, can take a little second, I will then get emails which ask me if I can disable this flow or not. And then in this email, I can say, yes, you can please delete or archive this, or no, I still need this. Might take a while. So for the sake of not wasting too much time, I could just go back here and let this run a little bit more. But maybe to give you another overview and kind of in a nutshell, what have we learned in the field? People are doing Office 365 governance manually currently. And with that system, we hope we can help you guys to, first of all, check the policies that you're most interested in, tailor them to your needs, build reports on the findings of the policy violations, and then automate through Power Automate templates so you can stay highly flexible and build this system completely to your needs. Let me go back to the slide deck. So let me just turn this on again. So what we will do at this point, this version that I just showed to you guys, it is free for now. We want to have more feedback from all of you guys who want to try it out. The way we go about this is you have an URL here. Chrissy, can you please put this URL into the chat window? And this URL brings you to a meeting link, and you can just, if you are interested to try it out with your own data, schedule a meeting with me, and I take you through the onboarding. You can just play around with it, and I hope I can take a little bit of your time to get a little bit more feedback around the current state of that solution. We already have a lot of ideas of how we can furthermore improve this, and I would love to kind of take it on a one-on-one basis in one-on-one calls to get your feedback, because that has worked out pretty well for us to develop that closely with our interested folks that want to try it out. Waldek, anything else you want to add, or shall we go to questions and answers already?
Yes, we have two questions that have been asked during the webinar. I think let's go through them. Maybe some more will appear as we talk, and otherwise maybe there are some other things that will become relevant. We go to. So first one was, can we ensure that Office 365 groups always have more than 2 owners, and also be able to detect when any owner leaves the org? So that would be a typical example of a policy that we would build, that we would allow you to, one, keep track of the number of owners assigned to a group. And I think we already have a policy in place that detects whether resources are owned by a disabled account, basically to avoid that you have resources that aren't accessible because there is no owner to it, right? So that would be either a combination of these two things, or we would have a specific policy that allows you to set the number of owners you would like to have at least on each resource, and then also know or ensure that the owners that are assigned the minimum, these accounts are active, right? So that is a policy that we could then offer you, and then based on that, whenever the number of owners drops below the limit, then we would trigger your automation, and then you would be able to reach out to either the IT, tenant admin, or whoever to address that. Another question that we have is, what kind of access role is required to use our tool? For example, global tenant admin, and so forth and so on. So the way we go about it is that we require policy, or we require permissions based on policies you enable. So in other words, when you start using our tool, we will not ask you to grant us any access because we don't know what you are interested in. So with that, we don't want to ask you upfront for any access that you do not want. Instead, what we will do is that as you enable policies, and for example, a policy, let's say you are interested in checking unused sites, where, well, for that, we need to be able to access sites, but we don't need access to groups or teams or flows or anything else. So we will not ask for access to that. We'll just ask access to the resources you want to monitor, right? So as you use the tool, the more policies you enable, the more permissions you will grant us, but they will always be limited to only the things you are interested in.
Yep.
Let's see if there is another one. Rancor governance is a cloud-based tool. What data is being gathered? So as we analyze your tenant, we check for different things you enable, right? So for example, if you want to find premium flows, well, then we will look at your flows, we will scan, analyze them, and in the end, currently, we will only keep the list of the flows that are uncompliant, right? So for basically the data that we show and the data that we send to automation, this is the data that we keep. So for example, for each flow, you will have flow URL, flow ID, owners, their emails and names, because this is the data you want to automate on. So right, so this is the data we have to keep. So again, it's very minimal, and it's just limited to the data you are interested in. So if you don't want us to look around your teams, we will not, because first of all, like, we won't even have access to, right? So really, unless you specifically ask us to look at something, then we will use the bare minimum info that we need in order to assess whether these things are compliant or not. This is the only thing that we will do. Okay.
I think, Waldek, let me add something to that, because I think this question can be taken from another angle as well. We already learned that it will be hard for mostly bigger organizations and bigger enterprises to connect their tenant to a software as a service application that runs, for example, in Azure. What we will do for bigger enterprises that have security concerns, we will make this available to for you to let this run in your Azure. So I think that's a little bit where the questions go to as well.
Yeah, cool. All right, let's have a look at other questions that have been asked. Do we have licensing option for edu? We're not talking about the licensing yet, so currently it is free. If you're interested to use it, give it a try, reach out to us. And then when we are at the point that we talk about the licensing format and so on, like that is the moment where we will see how do we go about it.
Yes.
Um, this demo was, so there's another one. This demo was now with 47 resources. How does it look like enterprise environment? Over 500 resources. And it comments about performance for generating reports. So we have used this. So as you've seen, yes, you're right. In our environment, we don't have that much stuff because that's just a demo tenant. But we have used the tool already with, I don't know, a handful of enterprise companies.
Mm-hmm.
And they are indeed big. Like we had like one of the customers that we have onboarded, they have like thousands of flows. Works perfectly fine. Like it's a SaaS app that runs on Azure, and we benefit of all the scale abilities that it offers us. So yes, it is prepared for scale. With regarding to reports, I mean, sure, we show like currently in current shape, we only show resources that are compliant. So depending on policy, depending like how wide the policy is and on the state of your environment, you might only see a handful of flows, right? Because like if all flows are compliant over from the thousands you have and you only have 2 premium, well, then you will see only 2 of them.
Yeah,
right? So
but I think, sorry, let me add something there, Waldek. I think when the question comes to reporting, we are already or we already learned that a lot of people are working with Power BI. So so our next step will be that people can kind of visualize the data in Power BI, and then we probably will provide Power BI templates so that people can put the reports together themselves in Power BI and manipulate data and so on. And for the folks that are not in Power BI, yes, the data can be used in other tools as well. So for example, I recently just yesterday talked to a bigger enterprise organization that said, we're not using Power BI, we're using Tableau, all right? Then you can take this data and visualize it in Tableau. So kind of for the data visualization, for the reporting, we will make use of these kind of tools.
Cool. Then there's another question regarding: do we only need to pay the licensing for us, Rancor, or is there also a cost component involved regarding usage on Azure? So if you use this as SaaS, where we host it, you would only pay the license for us. There is no additional Azure cost incurred, right? It's already calculated in the license price. If you choose to host it for yourself, well, then yes, then you would have the additional cost of maintenance and operation and Azure cost added to that. So that would be then a consequence of you running that by yourself as opposed to allowing us to host it. How does the licensing of that work? As I said, like we're currently in an early stage where we really want to learn more about your needs and what you're interested in, and not really as much about the licensing form. So currently, it is free in preview. When we'll get to the point that we know about the licensing, then we can revisit the topic then. And then final question that we have is: what data information does Rancor take from All365 tenant? So again, it's limited. It depends on what policies you enable. If you enable policies about flows and premium flows, then we will look specifically at flow and aspects that make premium flow premium. If you look, for example, at usage of teams, then we will look at aspects that are related to that. So we are not looking in anything else that is not related to policies that you have enabled. So the policies you enable, the checks you would like us to do, really drive the data into which we look. And there is a final question. There's one more. They keep coming, which is great. Regarding, okay, so currently we are free, but in order for anybody to be able to evaluate that, they need to understand potential costs that would be involved in order to decide whether it's even interesting or not. So Bjorn, do you have any advice for somebody who would want to know upfront a little like the ballpark in which range what they should think about,
Well,
or any advice about that?
I can talk a little bit about our idea how we would base pricing in general, but to be honest, it's a little too early to talk about fixed. Like I can't even give you a ballpark figure. We will probably price. It will be a user-based pricing. So depending on how many Microsoft licenses you have, you will fall into different categories. But as for general ballpark figures, to be honest, we can't tell at this moment. And I really would encourage you to just take the meeting link, schedule a meeting, and let us take it from there. We are still in that really early phase in which we want to learn, and we want to learn with you what you would consider fair pricing also. And then we take it from there, because it's just too early. We don't want to communicate pricing at this point because we didn't put so many thoughts into that until now. For us, the first step is to make a kick-ass product, to get your feedback on pricing, on functionality. We have version 1. We will soon launch version 2 with all the learnings that we did so far. We need your help to learn a little bit more. And then we need also your help to find pricing that fits you guys, because it doesn't help us neither to have like a fantasy price on that, which no one is eager to pay. So that's all I can say to that.
Cool. So I guess that was it. If there are
two more questions, I think, or are they kind of the same?
Yeah. Yeah, so basically it's all about pricing info. So it seems that there is interest around pricing and eval. So that's definitely something that we need to think about soon.
Mm-hmm.
But
good to hear, yeah.
Yeah. So if there are no other questions, and if there is nothing else that you would like to share or add regarding on what we learned or what originally drove us to this concept, maybe?
No, I think we're good at the moment. So yeah, I would say thanks everyone for the time. I would love to have a meeting with you. Take the meeting link, schedule a meeting, and then we talk one-on-one. Let's talk. We don't bite. And then thanks for the time. We will send out the recording pretty soon. Yeah, and then take it from there. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.